So here's your four main themes of what the FSMA is now covering. Prevention, the number one thing. And if we can prevent it, which means we then have to do rules and regulations and things that govern the process of making food and making it available to consumer, then to make sure people are in compliance, we have to have some way to inspect it and respond to things that are not in compliance with our rules and regulations. This also, like I said, goes into your import safety, and we'll start looking at what they're importing and the process of what other countries are using. And then we don't run into the issues that you saw in the one slide previous, where we're having things come in that are contaminated from other countries like Mexico, Turkey, just to name a few. As of 2 days ago, I think it was, the USDA passed a brand new law which says United States producers, poultry producers, can take live chickens, ship them to China, have them processed in China at large chicken processing plants, packaged, shipped back to the United States, and put on the shelves for you, the consumer, to take home, fix, and eat. Now, is that safer than having people in the United States do that? And you have to ask yourself, how many of those chickens are going to die between here and China and before being processed, and what are the conditions they're going to be in route? Both ways, actually. So the FDA now also has to look at your rules and regulations and those policies governing transportation, not just nationally, but internationally. And hence, on the far left side here, we have enhanced partnerships. They're going to have to partner with numerous agencies and numerous countries to meet their own criteria to ensure food is safe for the American consumer. So to do that, like any other agency in the United States, you start off with a good idea, and then you've got to build the structure and the framework of those departments that have to go out there and enact the policy which you've just signed law or into policy. And here's what happens with the FDA. These are all the brand new subdivisions that fall under the FSMA that are going to go out there to ensure that you have safe food to eat. It's pretty interesting. There's over 20 of them, hence the requirement for a $500 registration fee for us poor farmers and producers that are producing food for the American public. You just take a minute to look at all that, and you see something pretty repetitive here. Safety regulations, preventive control guidance, safety food transport, food defense. What is food defense? That's not a food fight. That's actually partnering with, over here under some of their state agency integration, partnering with Homeland Security so that in case there's a food issue and maybe somebody's going to try to use food as a weapon against us, they also are brought into the fray to protect us and have food safety. So it's a big organization, going to take a lot of money and have its fingers in every aspect of food production. So we're going to kick off taking a look at the preventive piece, because that's kind of what's going to impact upon the local farmer and also upon the enterprises you choose and your profits, because somebody had to finance this organization and this new act. And like we've said, it will be you, the farmer, and actually every step of the way through. So if we're looking for preventive controls, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to identify hazards, and then as you go around this circle, it's like any other circle, understand the cause, implement the preventive controls, you enact controls. If the controls are going to be successful, somebody's got to monitor them, somebody's got to come out and inspect them, make sure they're in compliance. If they're not working, then you got to review and adjust them and write more controls, or come up with more people to go out and inspect. And it becomes a very vicious circle on preventive controls that just kind of rolls down the road and continues to move, making sure that we are safe, we the consumers. And here's how we start off. Cool written records. Mandatory controls for food facilities. everyone's going to have to write, and is required to write and implement, a written food safety plan. Got to have it on paper. And it's up to you to go out and evaluate your hazards. Then in the plan, you're going to have to specify what steps you're going to take to mitigate those hazards. Sorry. You have to specify how the facility will monitor the controls, which if you don't have somebody monitoring them, then you're going to have to find some way to monitor them, whether it be through technology or through extra manpower or through modifying your enterprise daily routines so that you have another step in there that makes sure you're monitoring the controls. You're having to keep records on what you found, records on what's going on, records on every batch or every enterprise you're doing, so in case someone from an outside agency comes in to inspect you, you have your records to show them that you're in compliance with the new regulations. And you have to specify what actions the facility is going to take to correct the problems. Looks like a big, big plan that everybody's going to have to write. Now the FDA, they're coming down and saying, listen, we're making sure that everything that we do is science-based, just to make sure we know what the minimum standards are for safe production and harvesting of your fruits and vegetables. Well, over the years, throughout history in agriculture, I'm not so sure everything that people in agriculture have done would be science-based. I mean, a lot of you farmers out there, and me included, do things that we know have been tried and true, and maybe on the outset don't look like they should work that way, but they do. Now, I'm not sure if that's science-based or not, but you have to, we all tend to look at what are some of the natural hazards we might have to work into, what happens that's intentional, and some things that are unintentional, and stuff that just happens. But a lot of things we do, hence adding materials to the soil, such as compost, we realize is good for the soil. The United States Department of Agriculture, with all the acreage that has been in production and that has been in large agriculture and industrial agriculture using chemicals, has come back and said, listen, we have depleted a lot of the nutrients that are in the soil, which means a lot of the products that are coming out of the soil are not as nutrient rich, and hence people are not getting as good nutrients from the food they're eating, and it's affecting our health that way. And yet, this new act, the FSMA, states that they do not believe that maybe we, the producers, should be using compost. That compost could be dangerous. There could be pathogens in the compost that you're putting out on the soil that you're going to use for growing vegetables or fruits. And as such, we may say you can't use compost on your soil. We're also going to control the temperatures to make sure what you do meets the right temperature specifications. And Lord forbid that the ground that you're going to grow something on sometime during the process had some animals, maybe chickens, maybe pigs, maybe your cattle went across it and used it the first part before you planted it as a pasture, and then you put your garden in there, that they had gotten into that area and possibly contaminated it with manure or contaminated the water source you're going to use. All considerations that the FDA now are looking at under this new act and have decided that they may have to regulate. So the picture's down below here with the guy putting compost on and the chickens, and many of you know who Joel Salatin is and some others, who believes in multi-species or permaculture, where you've got multi-layer production, where you've got your orchard growing apples and underneath you're pulling your chicken carts through so that they can eat the bugs and eat the produce that's fallen on the ground and kill and eat up some of the bugs that are getting in the area and leave manure behind to enrich the soil with nitrogen. That, in the future, may not be legal. We take that the next step, which is intentional contamination. Adulteration of food. What are you doing to the food? Or what is the process or the processors doing to the food before it reaches the shelves and comes back to the you or the customer or the consumer? And so anything that goes on there within the process that adulterates food, i.e. things like putting wax on apples or injecting something into fruits that may keep them from, like an apple, keep them from turning brown if they're sliced into or get old. Same way with tomatoes. I know at the University of Idaho, last year it was the freshman requirement to read a book called Tomatoland, and it all talked about what was going on with the whole chemicals and raising tomatoes and how it was beginning to show some real problems within the production of tomatoes. So anytime you adulterate foods in the future, the FDA has said, well, this may be an internal or an intentional contamination that we want to look into. We want to assess the hazard to people and assess the hazard to the land and see if that's something we want to regulate and put rules and regulations to. So to be in compliance with all the new preventive standards, and down here we've got our little pathogen bug running around here that's telling you to do all this stuff. You know, they're going to look at sanitation. Sanitation is going to be a must. And to make sure that sanitation on your farm is a must, that goes into your plan, somebody's going to have to come out and assess it. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more and do some illustrations thereof here as we get into the exemptions in some of the state rules. But sanitation is a big thing. Is your process sanitary? Is there some place within your process where pathogens could get in and damage the food, or could wind up making a consumer sick? About 3 slides ago, we talked about the fact you're going to have to write a plan. What I didn't tell you was that the plan has to be written by somebody qualified to write the plan. So supervisors and employees have to be trained. Whoever's going to write the plan is supposed to go through a training workshop so he understands or she understands just how it is this plan should be written and what it should contain, and then you're qualified by taking the class to be a person on the farm or a facility to write the plan, which is going to govern how you do your enterprise. Once again, compliance with all the standards. You've got to monitor all the controls. You've got to look at the allergens that might be in there and how are you going to control those? Do you have a recall plan, contingency plan? Somebody gets sick. Let's take this into, and I'll talk about it in a few minutes, if you are a small dairy using a herd share, i.e. somebody contracts with you to get raw milk, just what is your plan if somebody who takes that raw milk home gets sick? And if somebody gets sick from your raw milk, really, how are you going to figure out whether it was the raw milk that made them sick, or was it their stop at a restaurant, or was it a stop at a fast food place where they may have gotten contaminated from something else? As we've seen through numerous cases in the press, by the time they figure out what has made you sick, you as a producer may no longer be a producer because you'll probably have been shut down until they get the answer. And if that's what you're relying on for your livelihood, you have to wait until you're cleared. And generally what happens, even after you're cleared, there's still the suspicion there that might have come from you, so your enterprise has been damaged and your reputation. So you've got to come up with all these great good manufacturing practices, and you've got to be able to verify those activities. So down at the local area, this has become a big deal.